Hello, everyone. My name is LaTreese Hall, and the title of my presentation is Social and Emotional Learning in Alternative High School, a Sports-Based Approach. The collaborative for academic, social, and emotional learning offers this definition for social and emotional learning, SEL. They say that it's the process through which children and adults acquire and effectively apply the knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. In other words, SEL enhances students' capacity to integrate skills, attitudes, and behaviors to deal effectively and ethically with daily tasks and challenges. Studies have shown that SEL can facilitate academic learning, fewer negative behaviors, more positive attitudes, reduced stress, and other positive outcomes. For an SEL program to be considered effective, Castle recommends imparting 5 core competencies, and they are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision making. Now, I'm going to go over each of these a little bit more. Now, this is not meant to be a comprehensive review of each of these competencies, but this is just to give you a little bit more of an idea of what each competency entails. So, with self awareness, this is basically helping children identify emotions and helping them have accurate self perceptions of themselves, teaching them to recognize their strengths as well as their challenges, and developing self confidence. Self management includes impulse control, stress management, self discipline, self motivation, and goal setting. With social awareness, this includes perspective taking, having empathy towards others, appreciating diversity, and having respect for others. Relationship skills includes communication, not just communication, but effective communication. It also includes social engagement, relationship building, and teamwork. And responsible decision making includes identifying and solving problems, analyzing situations, evaluating and reflecting, and other metacognitive processes, and having ethical responsibility. SEL is particularly important when discussing alternative high school students for a number of reasons. Now, I'd like to note that while our alternative school has a few different definitions for the purpose of this presentation, when I speak about alternative high school students, I'm speaking about students who have been expelled or otherwise removed from their home schools for various reasons, typically for emotional or behavioral issues, or they just need a different type of school as opposed to a public school environment to be able to succeed. So sometimes they'll be at risk for school failure. Now, what you'll see a lot of times with it alternative schools is that the students display low social emotional intelligence. So that's why it's very important, because SEL not only helps these students succeed in school, but these are life skills that they'll need for success generally in life. So now that we've discussed what SEL actually is and why it's important when speaking about alternative high school students, I'd like to discuss how implementing SEL in alternative high school through sports could be effective. Well, first, sports is inherently social. It has a perpetual social component where athletes of individual sports like bowling or cycling or golf, they challenge other players of the same sport. So there's this interpersonal sort of component. And then when you have team sports like football and basketball and softball, the teammates cooperate with each other while competing against other teams. So there's all types of social dynamics that go on in sports. Also, sports is very prevalent and very popular in our society. Over 50 million youth between the ages of 6 and 17 participate in sports each year. So there's just this undeniable prevalence and popularity. So a lot of times, the idea behind this is that when you have children that you can't reach any other way, there might be a way to reach them through sports if they have an intrinsic motivation towards sports. Um, Also, I think that implementing this type of program in an alternative school could be effective because alternative schools typically have greater flexibility with their curriculum, where they're not as rigidly affixed to Common Core state standards. So these are just some of the reasons why implementing SEL in an alternative school through sports could be effective. So what does the research say about SEL being implemented through sports? Well, to be quite frank, there is a major gap in the literature regarding the implementation of SEL through sports. And there's an even larger gap when you discuss the alternative school population. But there have been a few studies that do have relevance, and I'd like to review what some of these studies say. In 2014, Bean, Whitley, and Gould conducted a series of interviews with 23 athletes who participated in the Think Detroit Police Athletic League, TDP, for at least 3 years. So the participants' ages ranged from 10 to 18 years, so they were adolescents, and the interviews revealed that most of the athletes perceive their time with TDP as enjoyable and socially rewarding. And this socially rewarding aspect sort of relates to social awareness and relationship skills competencies that were described by Castle. The athletes also noted that TDP helped them to stay on track, which relates to self awareness, self management, and responsible decision making. Also, the life skills that they said TDP taught them, like emotional control, leadership, and the value of hard work, also relates directly to these five core competencies that were sort of recommended by Castle. So in 2016, Gordon, Jacobs, and Wright conducted a study that examined the connections between the implementation of the Teaching Personal and Social Responsibility Instructional Model, TPSR, and SEL outcomes. So they conducted interviews with various stakeholders of the school, the principal, assistant principal, social worker, a couple of coaches, and some of the students who had actually participated in this after school leadership program. Well, they found that many of the students in the program sort of took on and started to develop many of the SEL outcomes. They also highlighted that not only did they observe the children taking on these outcomes, but the students perceived themselves as helping as the program helping them to develop and practice the SEL outcomes. Also in 2016, Van Bokel and colleagues analyzed data from a large-scale Minnesota student survey that was conducted in 2010. Well, this was a pretty large sample size. They evaluated data from 12,849 12th grade students who regularly participated in school organized sports. The researchers found that when compared to students who did not regularly participate in school organized sports, the ones that did had more favorable perceptions of family, teacher, and community support, as well as more favorable perceptions of school safety. Well, the researchers in, interpreted that student participation in school organized sports encourages attitudes and behaviors that align with Castle's core competencies. For instance, the perceptions of a safe school environment and engagement in the school community align with Castle's competency of social awareness. The researchers also postulated that regular participation in school sports fosters transferable social skills, and that directly relates to Castle's core competencies. So the research also seems to indicate that the core competencies of Castle can be addressed with sports, even with children and adolescents with emotional or behavioral disorders, or EBD. In 2013, Samalot Rivera and Peretta investigated the effect of social skills instruction on social behaviors of children and adolescents with this EBD diagnosis. They investigated it during sports and games as well as during the rest periods. So, 6 students were in the study, and they were between the ages of 10 and 17. They had an EBD diagnosis and they attended alternative school. So, this study is probably the most applicable to my presentation because a lot of times you'll find that students that are in alternative school, they often have an EBD diagnosis. So what they did was they provided an intervention where they taught them social skills, and the intervention lasted for about 20 to 25 minutes. They received it for 3 times a week over the period of 5 weeks. And after they analyzed the video recordings and saw how they interacted with their classmates during the intervention as well as during recess or rest times, um, they found that some of the children, they increased their appropriate behavior and decreased their inappropriate behavior. But they also found that in the generalization setting, like at recess or during the break, only 3 of the 6 participants increased appropriate behavior, and 2 of the 6 decreased inappropriate behavior. But there was a major limitation of this study, and it was the length and the frequency of the intervention. Because they only lasted for 20 to 25 minutes and only delivered 3 times a week for only 5 weeks, I don't think that this was really enough time to have much success. But the encouraging part is that even though the length and the frequency of the intervention was pretty short and, in my opinion, sort of inadequate for what they were trying to do, there still was some success. So, one could kind of posit that if you increase the frequency, increase the length of time of the intervention, if the intervention is consistent, deliberate, and lasts over a longer period of time, there could possibly be greater successes. So this is the framework that Castle uses for systemic social and emotional learning. And they want the 5 core competencies to be implemented at all 3 levels of school functioning. So in the classrooms, in the school, and in the community and at home. And I think by aligning with this framework, but just situating the implementation within the context of sports and athletics, um, those at-risk students might be able to be reached if they haven't responded to other approaches of SEL. Thank you.